Start by dividing the largest measurement by 2 plus 3 to 4 inches, and here we have the largest measurement to be 22 inches. Divide that by 2 and you get 11 plus 4, that's 15. I'm dividing 15 by 2, that's 7.5, and ruling a line across. Here I am marking the half length, which is 9 inches. I'll mark it at 2 points, then I'll rule a line across as well. On the shoulder line, divide the shoulder by 2. Here it is 10, divided by 2 is 5. Mark on the front and on the back shoulder line. You come down to mark your chest line. The chest here is 22 divided by 6 plus 2.5 gave me about 6 inches. So that's how you get your chest line. Then rule the chest line. I recommend you mark your shoulder line on the chest line again to get a straight line. Next, I'm marking my neck width for the front to be 2 inches and the neck depth to be 2 inches. And for the back, the neck width is 2 inches and the depth is 5 inches. You check the banner on the screen to know how to get your neckline. With the help of your French curve, make a curve for the front neckline and the back neckline. Slope the shoulder for the front by 1 inch and for the back by half an inch. Then rule a line to connect the points. Next, I will alter the neckline. The width I'm extending by 1 inch for both necklines. Then on the front neckline, I would come down by 1 inch as well to extend the depth of the neckline and connect the points. Divide the chest circumference by 4. Here we'll have 5.5 for the front and for the back, and the waistline also is 5.5 inches. Next, connect the armhole from the shoulder point to the chest line with the help of your French curve. Then connect a straight line from the chest line to the waistline. Next, we go ahead to cut the pattern for the front and the back block. The making of this dress consumed 3 yards of fabric in total. Place unfold the length of the flare plus the radius. So the first flare is 9 inches plus 1 inch, that's 10, plus the radius 4, that's 14. So here lengthwise I have 28. So you place it on fold again. To get a full circle, you will need to place the fabric on 4 folds. So here I'm marking out the 4 inches radius, and I'll mark out the length also of the flare, which is 10 inches, and I'll cut out. Please check the link in the description box to see how to cut a 360-degree flare. Next, place the flare on another fabric to get the lining piece. The second and the third flare is also cut as a full circle. However, the middle flare is attached 1 inch below the waistline to avoid the waist area being too bulky. Since I am working with the same waist, the radius here is also 4 inches, but the length this time is 17 inches plus 1, which would give me 18 inches. You would need to split one part of the folded area. This opening will be for the zipper at the center back. For the lining piece, you place the fabric on fold once. Here we are cutting a 180-degree flare. The radius is 7 inches. The waist is divided by 3.14 and the length is 15 inches. It should be shorter than the length of the main dress. Transfer the pattern of the upper bodice on fabric. Add 1.5 inch on the side seam and 1/2 inch on every other area. You will need to cut double the fabric. One of them will serve as the lining, and also it's advisable to iron interfacing on one of the pieces. Then add interfacing to the first layer of the fabric as well. So that's the first layer, and this is the interfacing cut already to be ironed. And here are the back pieces of the upper bodice with the interfacings. This is the lining piece for the flare, so I marked 1 inch below the waistline, and around that area I have 30 inches. I'll divide that by 6.25 to get a full circle. The length of the first hard net will be 6 inches and the second length will be 7 inches. Here is the hard net that we'll be using. Unfold is 10 inches radius plus 6 inches length, and you place 16 inches on fold again lengthwise. So here I'm marking out the 10 inches radius, and next will be the length of 6 inches for the flare. Connect the markings and cut out. Here is the cutout flare. I would recommend you place it on fold again so you can have it on 4 folds, and measure around the hem. The hem gave 25 inches times 4, that's 100. Place lengthwise the hard net. I would exhaust about 2 yards and mark 7 inches length continuously. I got about 5 strips but ended up using 7 strips in total. Remember, the flare for the hard net is on 4 folds, so separate one part of the folded side. That is for the zipper on the center back. All strips will be joined together and gathered to fit around the hem of the first flare. This is how you create the underskirt for this dress. Here I'm gathering the strips on the hem of the flare, gathering as I sew along. Keep gathering the net by hand around the hem of the flare till you get to the end. If there are excesses, you can trim it off. Next, bend the seam allowances downwards to the gathered net and top stitch. This helps to flatten things around that area. On the waist area of the underskirt, place on fold and create a notch on the center. Place on fold again to create another notch. This gives 4 notches. Repeat the same process of notching the center front and notching on fold again on the satin fabric that will be carrying the hard net. Here I am feeling the rough side of the satin, which is actually where the markings are. That is where you'll be top stitching the underskirt to. Again, on the underskirt, I am showing you that the seam allowances area is the wrong side. So the good side is what you'll be placing on the satin, sewing and flipping downwards. Kindly identify the notched areas. This will help you know how to gather the excesses on each segment. I would recommend you gather halfway and start again from the other end of the waist area. This way your gathers are evenly spread, and when you are done, this is how your underskirt or petticoat should look like. Here I am sewing my crinoline by 1/2 inch on the hem of the first flare. It is advisable to place your crinoline on the lining piece. The lining piece is carrying the interfacing here. When you are done sewing, flatten out the fabric and bend the seam allowance towards the lining piece as shown and start top stitching. This step is very important. It helps the hem of the peplum wave. As you sew along, it's advisable to check the bottom of the fabric to ensure everything lays flat around there. When you are done, this is how it should look like. Find the seam allowances top stitched on the crinoline area, and when you flip, the top stitch is only on the lining piece and not on the front at the good side. Go ahead to weave the hem of the underskirt satin, and this is how it looks. For the upper bodice at the front, I have gone ahead to turn the neckline and top stitch the seam allowance towards the lining area. You always find the top stitch on the lining piece. Here is the back bodice, and I have gone ahead to sew by 1/2 inch the neckline. So when you flatten it out, you bend the seam allowance towards the lining piece. Then you go ahead to top stitch that down. On the other back bodice piece, I'll be sewing the neckline again by 1/2 inch, stopping about 2 inches before I get to the main center back for the zipper area. Notch around the neckline and bend the seam allowances on the neckline towards the lining piece again. Next, we will proceed to join the shoulder. Place the shoulder of the back bodice on the shoulder of the front bodice and close them all with the lining piece of the front bodice and sew down by 1/2 inch. When you open the shoulder, this is how it should look. The front and the back seam is neatly done. Repeat the same process on the other shoulder. Sewing also by 1/2 inch. You can go ahead to trim off any excess and open up for a clean finish. Next, we go ahead to join the side seam. Lift up the satin and the lace for the front and the back and sew the side by 1.25 inches. It is advisable to bend in the seam allowances at the waist area as shown, top stitching it down by 1/2 inch and repeating the same on the chest line at the armhole area. This helps to keep the seam allowances flat when you're attaching the sleeve and attaching the flare part. Also sew the lining piece of the back and the lining piece of the front by the side seam by 1.25 as done for the main fabrics, and bend the seam allowances down on the waistline and on the armhole around the chest line as well. Repeat the same process of sewing the side seams fabric to fabric, lining to lining on the other side. The second and the third flare don't have a lining piece. I have faced the crinoline on the good side of the satin and I am top stitching the seam allowance on the fabric. Flip the crinoline backward and top stitch very close to the edge of the crinoline. Ensure not to pull the crinoline as you sew. Ease the crinoline into the stitch, and this is what it should look like when you are done. The width of the stitch is the same width of the crinoline. Next, you are to sew a loose stitch around the waistline of all flares. Remember, we approximated all the radius. It is actually larger than the actual radius, and pull on the thread to create the gathers. Measure around the waistline. The actual waist is 22 inches, but we'll be needing up to 24 inches. The extra 2 inches would serve as the zipper allowance, 1 inch on both sides. When you are done gathering, both flares should match up. Come in with the upper bodice. You'll be joining the main fabric of the upper bodice and the flares together, excluding the lining piece of the upper bodice. Sew a stitch length of about 5 inches and start sewing from the other side of the waistline. This method helps the gathers on the flare waistline match up with the waistline of the upper bodice. I would advise you eyeball the gathers as you sew along. Spread out clustered areas. Ensure the gathers are evenly spread at the end of the day. This way you are sure the waistline is balanced and the gathers are well spread around the waistline. Later we would attach the petticoat flare for the lining piece. Here I am folding down the hem of the sleeve by 0.75 inches. I've done the same thing for the other sleeve. That would be for the elastic channel. Create a loose stitch at the upper area of the sleeve and pull on the thread. There will be gathers at the upper side of the sleeve. When you are done, place the sleeve on fold, good side on good side. Sew the sides by 1 inch, stopping few inches before the hem of the sleeve to create room to pass the elastic. Once you are done, place the side seam of the sleeve matching with the side seam of the upper bodice, and once again bend the seam allowances of the sleeve and sew it down by half an inch if needed, or pin it in place. Next, match up the sleeve with the shoulder and sew it all around like a circle. Back to the waistline of the lining piece. We'll be attaching the flare serving as the lining piece on which the petticoat has been attached. Sew it down by half an inch, ensuring the waist area is straight and nice. Sew the center back of the lining piece by 1 inch, starting at about 8 inches from the waistline. On that point where you stopped, pick the hard net, facing it against each other, and start sewing from that point all the way down to the hem of the hard net. Sew it down by 1 inch. We are done with the lining center back. For the center back of the main fabric, arrange the flares, ensuring that they are all aligned at the center back. Match up the waistline, ensuring that the seams are aligning as well, and sew the center back of the main fabric by 1 inch. Place your zipper on the center line, ensuring it is well centered. Sew one side of the zipper area on the seam allowance, backstitch at the end point, then go ahead to sew on the other side of the zipper area also on the seam allowance of the main fabric. When your zipper is inserted, you can go ahead to remove the loose stitch created in order to get the center line where you would place your zipper. You can see the hard net is separated from the main fabric as well as the lining piece. Now you will face the lining piece to cover the zipper area, facing it down as shown, sewing it down in such a way that the zipper is sandwiched between the lining piece and the main fabric. When you are done, the wrong side of the zipper line should look like this, the lining covering the zipper the way it is on the front. Get a piece of fabric to seal the rough edge of the crinoline to avoid it itchy on the skin. Flatten out the fabric, trim off excesses if required, and fold it back down and top stitch it. You can do this for the longer flare only. This is the one that touches the skin. Match up the side seams of the waistline, the center front, and any other area around the waist seams to secure both the fabric and the lining together to avoid things moving around. Here I am showing you how I attached the middle flare. It is 1 inch below the waistline. Ensure to weave around that circumference so it doesn't fray. Revealing the front side of the dress, it should look like this, the 3-layered flare. The width of the bow is 10 inches and the length is 7 inches. The length is 14 inches actually. When you place it on fold, it becomes 7 inches. Scrunch the middle of the bow and create a loop. The loop can be 4 inches wide. When you sew it inside out by ½ an inch, it becomes 1½ inches, and place it around the bow. Sew and cut off any excess. Top stitch the bow on one side of the dress and attach with a press button on the other side. And the dress is ready. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.